Um, and you can put down pre-plant fertilizer based on your soil test recommendations. Your root crops are commonly planted closer together because you want to decrease that weed pressure. You can also look at weed barriers, weed fabric, some of those other options to kind of counteract that weed pressure. If you don't want to plant them as close together, weed fabric's probably going to be your best bet, and just kind of pulling it out, burning holes in it with a lighter, and going through and planting that way. Because burning holes in it is going to be easier than trying to come in and cut them. It's going to be more efficient, and you can burn them to the size you need also. So smaller holes, less likely to get a lot of weed pressure coming up that way. Raised beds are another good option with root vegetables. Also, carrots do really good in raised beds. You just need to make sure you've got a good depth in them. It's like a lot of people are doing those grow bags for potatoes now also. So you just get, you're probably looking at least 30 feet.
30 feet?
3 feet.
30.
No. I'd say 3.5 feet. And then optimal soil temperature, 40 to 45 degrees to support germination. Ideally, you're going to want 50 to 65, 75 degrees for some varieties. It just depends on what variety you're looking for. A lot of these, especially with carrots, the cooler it is as they're maturing, actually helps with the flavor. It gives them a better flavor. So being able to, and we'll talk about it later, being able to extend that grow period to when the temperature gets cooler, the soil gets cooler, it actually enhances the flavor of those root vegetables. And again, simple things too to use when you're doing this. Just sticking a simple thermometer into the soil and just making sure the temperature's right. I think a lot of times some people will make that mistake where they think, well, it's still warm out. So, ground and air temperatures, there can be a little bit of a distinction there. So making sure your temperatures are right when you get in there to start planting is always a good thing to check. So growing garlic. So we're in the right window right now to be planting garlic if you're thinking about it. Because we typically plant from the 1st of September to early November. So I'd say, second week of November is probably the cutoff point. But it grows for a long time, 180 to 220 days, depending on the variety you're looking at. You typically want to get it early to midsummer, so end of June to 1st of July, probably when you're looking at harvesting, by the calendar classification for early to midsummer. Again, choosing a loose soil, you want to pH with this one, you got a little more leeway to work with 5.8 to 6.5. But I'd probably want to hang around that 6 to 6.2 area. You're going to plant your cloves, and this is an important one. And planting depth's always, I think that's one of the big things when people are planting any kind of crop. When they plant something, it doesn't come up. They instinctively say, "Well, what happened? Why? Did I get bad seed? Did I not fertilize right?" A lot of times when the things don't come up, it's because they plant them too deep. Because you plant. You look at some of these seeds. I mean, they're itty bitty seeds. And garlic cloves are going to be a little bit bigger. But I mean, if you're planting carrot seeds, carrot seeds are real small. If you plant them too deep and they start to germinate, if they're too deep, it's not gonna. Nothing's gonna come up. You think, well, I just wasted all that seed because nothing came up. But with your garlic cloves, an inch to an inch and a half, I'd err more on the inch side, because if you start getting too deep, you're gonna run that risk of possibly nothing coming up again. Now, I did the same thing. I planted lettuce. I got raised beds at the office. I planted some lettuce, and I'm pretty sure I planted it too deep last year. So I came back in and kind of made myself a little instrument to poke my holes to make sure it was the right depth, and I had a lot better results this year. So I mean, just making sure you've got the right depth when you're planting. Planting by hand is probably the best way, because you want to make sure with those garlic cloves, you want to make sure it's positioned where you're getting good, just straight cloves. You don't want it leaning to the sides, because that's going to affect your plant growth as well. Again, good drainage. Raised beds are a good option for garlic, because again, here in Marshall County, a lot of our soils have a lot of clay in it. That clay is going to hold on to the water, so that could lead to drainage issues. And then you can do, work with mulch to work with your weed suppression there. Or again, you can, if you're thinking about planting in the ground, weed fabric again is another good option as well. But the mulch will actually come into play, and the plastic can also, but if you don't want to use plastic mulch like the regular like straw mulch, wood-based mulch, that'll help. They have their pros and cons. We should talk about those here in just a second. Like I said, I sent it to somebody to look at, and they kind of moved some of my stuff around, and I was out yesterday, so I didn't look at it. But these are your garlic types. You've got hardneck, and where Tennessee is strategically placed, where we can grow all three varieties of garlic. And you need to kind of check, because some of these varieties in these types will do better than others. But we are placed where we're in that transition zone where we can grow all three of these types of garlic. But there's some varieties from these types will do better versus others. So it just depends. But we can grow all three types. Hardneck is going to be your stiff and woody stem. They typically are going to have fewer but larger cloves. These are probably best suited for colder climates. So this is the type you see a lot of times up north. It produces a scrape that you want to remove. They typically do have a shorter storage life also. Soft neck, they have a flexible soft stem. They'll make more numerous cloves. They're better suited for warmer climates, so the farther south you go, soft neck's going to be your common denominator down there. Very rarely does it produce a scrape, and it'll store for longer. And then you have your elephant, which is a very large and few cloves. Elephant's not actually a garlic; it's actually an elite family, but it produces a mild, sweeter flavor, and it kind of grows good in this transition zone also. So depending, there's probably years where the hardneck's done better down here, especially the last couple of years where Tennessee's gotten, it's gotten really cold here, so that's really good. And if you had soft neck, you would have to take some extra precautions, especially if you had it in the ground. And if you had it, you're growing in a greenhouse or had it in a raised bed, you'd have a little bit easier time to provide some protection. But if it was in the ground, you'd have to take steps, covering it with mulch, covering it with cold frames, low tunnels, things like that, just to provide some extra warmth, especially when it got really cold, because that soft neck especially would be more sensitive to sudden temperature drops. The hard neck, not as much, but the problem you'd run there is if, we had more of like last year we had a little bit milder winter. I say milder, we didn't have negative degrees last year, so comparison. And then the elephant is kind of in the middle, from what I remember reading about it. So these are some recommended cultivars. So Chestnut Red, Gingowski, German Red, German Extra Hardy, Music, Purple Glazer. Those are your hard necks. Soft necks, we got Inchelium Red and California White. Then Elephant looks like Tahiti. So it looks like with elephant, you don't really see any specific cultivars. It's just going to be probably classified as elephant garlic. Yeah. So, any questions so far, y'all? Are quiet. So, what you got?
What's a scape?
Oh, I was going to ask that.
So skate. We might.
I've heard of it, but I'm not quite sure what it is.
We probably will.
It's the flour that
Yeah.
comes up. You just pick it off though.
Yeah,
but
you
you can
pick
like
the flour.
saute it and eat it.
Oh, really?
Or like
Okay.
pickle it.
So it's basically.
Yeah.
It's just flour. Yeah. So harvesting garlic. You're typically not going to want to harvest if you have 4 to 6 green leaves, and that tells you when you're nearing harvest. And this is part of the tricky part about harvesting garlic. You got to harvest it at the right time. It can be, because again, it's down under the ground. You can't really tell if those cloves are done. So typically, you're going to look at those green leaves. You can pull a few cloves up to start looking at them to see if they're nearing their finishing stage. Make sure they're ready to be harvested. Because you don't want them to let them go too long, because they can start to decay and those cloves will start to basically become mush, and you just wasted your 8 to 10 months you've been growing this garlic for. The bottom leaf yellowing on hardneck is a good sign. to harvest on soft necks. The tops will begin to fall over. So if you notice, if you planted hard neck, you start seeing yellowing leaves down at the bottom. That tells you it's time to start harvesting. With soft necks, if those tops of those plants start to kind of tilt over, then it tells you it's time to start harvesting. But like I said, I would also, dig up a couple, and I wouldn't just dig up like one row. I'd dig kind of, depending on how big your garlic field is, garlic patch is, kind of hit or miss, kind of pick a few spots at random. That way you're getting a good idea of what the whole field's looking like. Because one corner may have gotten a little extra fertilizer, may get a little extra rain, something's going to happen there. It's just like when we pull a soil sample, you want to kind of randomly sample from across the field to kind of get an idea of what's going on. Like I said, you don't want to let your garlic get too mature because it'll start to rot. So use a shovel or a cutting bar to help loosen the roots. Because again, you see those roots are attached right to that bulb. So as you're trying to get, you gotta loosen or cut the roots to get the bulb out, but you don't want to be you gotta be real careful because you're too forceful, you can damage that bulb, and then again, that 10 months, we're out, no garlic. A lot of people will use, especially if the soil is real sandy and loose, you can come in with a cutting bar and you can cut down and under and cut the roots off, and then it makes pulling those cloves up a lot easier. Some people will come in with a small shovel and kind of work their way underneath the bulbs and just kind of pull them up. And then most of the time, once you get the bulb up, you go in with your hands and kind of clear all the dirt and everything away. Dirt and debris away to inspect the cloves and make sure they're good cloves. After you've harvested your garlic, you've got to cure it, and you've got to air cure it, and you've got to air cure it in a location where there's no sunlight getting to it. So you've got to find a location where you can cure it in the air, have good airflow, but where there's no sunlight, because if sunlight gets in there, it's going to affect it. It's going to mess with the curing process. So, that's where you need like a good shed, a good dark spot of a porch, or under a porch, somewhere dark, somewhere not necessarily dark, but somewhere where there's no sun infiltration and where you're getting good airflow, because you want it to cure. It's got to cure. That's how you got to cure it. You got to do it for 6 weeks too. So, it's a long process growing garlic. You got 220 days in the ground. Then you got to be super careful about harvesting it, and then you got to find a place to stick it for 6 more weeks to make sure it's cured right. So there's a lot to growing garlic. Carrots. The carrots are a little bit easier. Carrots need to be planted from September to late October, so we're still, up to next week, you can still plant some carrot varieties. They need 50 to 75 days to mature. Again, soil temperatures, kind of the same thing. We're looking at the garlic, 40 to 45 degrees. If you can get in that 50 to 60 ranges, you're probably going to see better germination rates, but minimum we want at 40, 45 degrees. And I haven't checked the soil temperature lately, but I'd say it's been dropping steadily because we've been having those cool mornings and cool nights. So, I would just, again, simple thermometer, stick it in the ground, kind of see what your soil temp is, and that'll give you a good idea if you've still got time to plant some carrots. Again, you want a good loose sandy soil, just like with our garlic. You can do carrots in rows or blocks. Then you can lightly cover with soil. For ideal germination, you want to cover with some straw or a board to retain moisture until those seedlings start to emerge. But if you do use straw, you can keep that as a mulch, and that'll help with your suppression. Again, you can use some wheat fabric, could also be an option. Carrots can be harvested at any time. They've reached your desired size for eating. If the temperatures are cooler, they are going to allow those roots to be harvested for longer. Because basically, when you've got a plant in the soil and the temperatures start to get cool, that soil is serving like cold storage for you. So it's going to keep those roots viable for you to harvest. If you do harvest your carrots, you want to keep them in a location between 32 and 35 degrees. with high humidity, you can store them for up to like 4 or 5 months. Like I said, cooler weather produces sweeter tasting carrots. So if you get them planted and you can extend that growing season, you can actually have some really sweet tasting carrots, more so than a spring planted carrot. Spring planted carrots, it gets hotter and hotter. That's going to affect the taste. The cooler it is, you actually get those better, sweeter tasting carrots. Just like you can use a shovel, trowel, or garden fork to loosen your soil for harvesting. But again, you just there's no set time. This is when you want to harvest them. You just basically harvest them when they've kind of reached your desired length for what you're looking for. So if you're wanting, big long carrots, you're probably gonna let them stay in the ground a little longer. If you're looking for more Bugs Bunny type carrots, maybe 50 to 60 days, depending on the variety and the growth rate. So let's talk about how to extend our growing season. And these can work with these plants, any other kind of fall plants you're thinking about doing. Windbreaks are a great way if you've got really sensitive plants. They provide some protection from cool fall winds. You want to protect with your windbreak, but again, you don't want to obstruct your airflow, because a lot of plants, they still need that airflow because that provides protection from, disease vectors, insects, things like that. And you don't want to obstruct it because you could inadvertently form a frost pocket, and then, instead of protecting your plants, you just killed your plants because you just kept frost right there on top of them. Plastic mulches are another good way to help raise the soil temperature. Darker mulches can help raise their temperatures. Lighter colors are more effective in the summertime because they can help actually keep the ground cooler. So if you've got plants planted and you've got plastic mulch out, use your lighter colors in the summertime because that'll keep the soil cooler. And use your darker colors in the wintertime to kind of keep that soil warmer. But you do run the risk also of keep trapping too much heat, and then you can't actually damage those plants. And with any kind of like plastic mulch, any kind of plastic, you want to make sure you're not actually touching the plants also, because if you do get we do get like a real cold night or cold morning. If you've got that plant touching that plastic gets cold, then you're going to risk damaging your plants because of the temperature transfer from that plastic to the plant. Whatever you're doing, you got to make sure you're monitoring your temperatures. So there again, just sticking a thermometer in the soil where you're growing, where you're trying to extend your growing season. If you keep that thermometer in there, that's going to give you an idea what the temperature is, what the variance is also between, in the morning, midday, nighttime, kind of gives you an idea. And if you need to look at some other alternatives, maybe the mulch, the plastic mulch isn't working, maybe we need to look at like cold frame or low tunnels or some things like that. Some things that might draw in or keep a little more heat, allow us to keep that going. Because again, we've all experienced it. Tennessee falls and winters are, one day it's 70 degrees and the next day it's like 35. So there's gonna be a big variance in our temperatures. Cloches are a good way. This is probably more effective. It's a good inexpensive way. It's probably more effective if you've got a small area. If you've just got a few plants you're trying to extend the growing season on, and you can make these. You can buy. There's cloches you can buy, but you can make these out of. You can take milk jugs and cut the bottoms out of milk jugs, take them and put them over top of your plants. And that's going to trap heat. And if you're using a milk jug, if it looks like it's getting too hot, you just take the cap off. You got a ready-made vent to let some of that heat out. You can also make them. They've got them where you can do water filled. So basically, it's a cloche, but it's got water filled sidewalls. So basically, you put water in there, and as it heats up, that heat as the water heats up, that heat will transfer into the plant. So that's another way to kind of help regulate the temperatures. But a lot of these will have. A lot of the ones you buy will have ready-made little venting systems in them, so if they start to get too hot, they've got as the air pressure gets different from hot to cold, they've got little vents that'll pop open to allow some of that excess heat to get out, so that way you're not burning your plants. But like I said, this is a real simple way. You know, you can take milk jugs, you can take 2 liter bottle, any kind of bottle basically that's big enough to fit over your plant. You just cut part of it off, stick it on there. You got a ready-made little greenhouse. So, any questions so far, y'all? I feel like I'm just sitting here talking.
You are.
So here's our cold frame. Like I said, ready-made. I mean, super easy to make too. This one, they made it out of straw bales and a glass window pane. So I mean, cold frames do not have to be super hard to make. So I mean, if you've got some glass window panes and you've got some straw bales and you've got a patch that you're wanting to keep, you can put your straw bales around it, put your glass window frame on top of it, and you've got a ready-made cold frame. Now you can get more intricate with these, because I saw pictures of ones that they had a wooden frame around the bottom, and they had ways to like prop the windows up. So that's a way, that would be your venting system if it was, again, we went from like a 35, 45 degree day where you were using this cold frame to, then we had like 2 days of like 65 or 70 degrees, and you didn't want it to get as hot in there. You could vent those up. And even with this, you can position, on those warm days, even with this straw and glass contraption we've got here, you can position that glass where you've got ways for that heat to vent out on days where it may get a little hotter than normal. But these are really good. This is a good way. It's kind of like close on a large scale, because you can cover a larger scale of plants. Again, it's going to probably work a little more effective in, or at least on the small scale, would probably work really effective in raised beds. And with raised beds also, depending on how deep you've got it, you do have ready-made walls. So I mean, you could simply come in and put your glass over top of it and make sure you've got your sides filled in. If you've got any cracks, you can fill in those sides, and you've got a ready-made. Because typically with a cold frame, you want to make sure you've got a hard surface or hard sides. So I mean, you can make them out of wood, bricks, if you really want to kind of make them permanent, because I don't know how many of us want to be toting around bricks and glass, but I would say a wooden structure with glass window panes is probably going to be the most common one. But again, if you've got straw bales, hay bales, I mean, if you had bags of shavings, I mean, anything, you could basically mount that glass on top of. What you got?
Would it affect it if it was a freestanding one and you had all that airspace under it?
It shouldn't, because it's just giving you more room to kind of heat the air, and that the more air you've got trapped under there will kind of help regulate so it doesn't get too hot. Because the biggest thing with the close is real small and real contained, so it's going to warm up really fast. Like this, you've got a wider area under that glass, so you've got more room to kind of help it regulate so it doesn't it doesn't overheat as quick. And again, even those warm days, we're gonna have less periods of long sunlight, so even that long sunlight it's gonna heat, but it'll help trap that air too, so that way, when it gets cooler, it's still got some of that warm air trapped under there that'll help extend and protect those sensitive plants into the night where it starts to get cooler. But again, and you can purchase these as well, but I mean, if you've got some old, I mean, you can make it out of pallets. Like I said, this one's straw and a couple glass window frames. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything too intricate. So, floating row covers. This is another good way to add some degrees of protection. And this is just a polyester fabric. The fabric's real permeable, and it will allow water and air to pass through. You just basically put it over long rows. This is probably going to be more effective if you're trying to kind of gardening on a larger scale, because you can get that stuff fairly cheap. Those long rows, you run those rows out. You can run plastic sheeting over it also, but like I was saying earlier, if you do run the plastic sheeting over it, you want to make sure you've got that plastic sheeting kept up high enough where it's not going to touch or come into contact with your plants. Because again, even on those hot days or cold days, either one, if it gets too hot or too cold, it's going to transfer that temperature to the plant. It's going to shock that plant. It's going to damage, could even kill the plant depending on the temperature change. So you don't want to see any damage like that, because we're trying to extend the season. We're not trying to like, suddenly go out there and say, well, why are all my plants dead? And then it's like, well, it was 25 degrees last night, but I had all this protection on there. Oh, but it's touching my plants. So there we go. That's what happened. Hooper low tunnels are kind of the next step up from that floating plastic. Honestly, these are probably, if you were going to do one or the other, this is probably your more effective way to do it, because you get more protection. You probably get more out of this than just the floating row cover. But that floating row cover, we didn't want to touch on that. But these are basically like you're making little greenhouses down your rows. Because you'll use, you have 2 to 3 foot tall hoops, and you basically run your plastic, and you can see here they've got the plastic pulled up, so they're actually letting it vent during the day, but they can pull it down if it gets cool enough, and it's still providing that greenhouse effect to those plants, giving them plenty of warmth. These I don't think they instinctively or naturally come with like venting systems, so, on those hot days, that's why they've got the sides pulled up so they can kind of let it vent out. But if it was a kind of a cool day, but still maybe kind of slightly sunny, you would still want to be kind of careful and kind of check. And that's where it would be kind of good to, if you've got 3 or 4 rows, putting a thermometer, whether it's a digital, some kind of way to check the heat. So that way you can come out and see, are my plants getting too hot? Because, it's like anything. We don't want our plants to overheat, because they start to overheat, we're going to start to lose them. And then all this work we've done into trying to extend that growing season, that would just wound up with killer plants. So we want to make sure, that's why making sure you're checking your temperature is really important. Because, if we're doing 2/3 of the work, where we're not checking our temperature, then we're kind of gambling with, is this working? Is it not working? Is it too hot? Is it not too hot? We want to make sure we're going all the work to set up these cold frames, or we're making these cloishes, or we're doing low hoops or low tunnels. We want to make sure we're getting the most effect out of it. But again, this would be something you probably see on a lot of your larger commercial gardening operations as they're trying to extend their growing season for specialty vegetables, crops like that. So high tunnels. These are the more elaborate way. I'll be upfront with you. I mean, these are going to be fairly expensive operations. Most of your high tunnels are fairly large, fairly long, fairly wide. Your plants are still planted into the ground. A lot of these, I mean, if you do a high tunnel, you're going to be looking at some way. You're going to have an irrigation system in there, because you're not going to have any natural rainfall. You are going to be looking at probably having fans installed on the ends to help draw off heat, because they'll have some venting, but you're going to need ways to pull off a lot of heat, because these are not going to be something you can take down and put up. Once it's there, it's basically there until it either falls down or you take it down. But they are effective. A lot of your larger, like I said, commercial gardening operations, commercial horticultures, a lot of your larger growers for ornamentals will use these to kind of keep their plants growing in the off season or the cool seasons. You're really seeing high tunnels become more and more. You see them a lot more than you used to. You used to see just like kind of the normal greenhouses, but we're seeing a lot more of these high tunnels now. I know there was an operation we went and toured a couple years ago out in West Tennessee, and they had several high tunnels where they were growing tomatoes and watermelons and cantaloupes and all kinds of stuff in there. So that's it. That's what I got. Y'all didn't ask a lot of questions today. It was really informational, or y'all just don't have a lot of questions for me today. What we got?
So I want to plant some garlic
Okay.
in they're like grow bags.
Yeah.
And I tried it last year and put them in my greenhouse, which doesn't have any electricity or
Yep.
anything, so it's cold. And they ended up dying off. I don't know why. They started out good. They got about this tall. I could see the green. And
What
then I don't know what
do you
happened.
remember? What variety or what type it was? Was it?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I want to say it was maybe hardneck.
Hardneck. Okay.
So I want to try that this year, but I don't know if I should try putting them in that greenhouse again, or if I should maybe put them in like the barn or something where it might be, it's more insulated. I don't know why they
Maybe
had
we
died
weren't
off.
getting water or something?
I would go in there and water all my stuff like maybe once a month or two or something like that. And most everything else pretty much survived, but they, for some reason, didn't.
They like it cool, don't they?
They like it cool, not too cool, but they do like cool. I mean,
It was definitely cold. in there.
garlic grows best in a well drained, so if it's a well drained soil, they're probably gonna need a little more watering, because they're not gonna hold on to the water as much.
Well, maybe I should.
So they might, I think you would probably be fine, you just may have to increase your watering
Okay.
schedule on those.
Okay, yeah, most of my other stuff that I put in there is like perennials that are in pots or something
Yeah.
that I throw in there, and they don't really need much, so.
Yeah,
I
I'd
didn't
say
think-
the
they
garlic
would.
probably, especially in those younger stages, it's gonna need a little more TLC.
Okay,
So probably a little more watering, a
I'll
little
have
more
to
care.
remind myself to.
Because I would think even with no electricity, as long as we had good sunny days, I mean, it would still keep the warmth in there.
Mhm.
And you might look at putting a little bit of straw or something on top of it too, to kind of help keep a little extra heat on there as well.
I did, yeah, I had some straw on it, but that was it, yeah.
Yeah,
So where do you
Okay.
find garlic this time of year, this late?
that is a good question.
Yeah, I know where.
I do not know.
I got some at the plant swap at Henry Horton. Those are the ones I'm gonna try planting, see how it works.
There was a bunch of people here in Horton today, so they might have some garlic and stuff down there. I do not know, you probably have to have already sourced it, because like I said, we're getting close to the end of the kind of growing, planting season for garlic also. And carrots are the same way. With carrots, we didn't mention it up here, but you can, a lot of times with carrots, people will start them from seed, so you just plant the seed, but you can also do some transplants, like you can start them inside and then transplant them in. It would just depend on the variety and temperature of planting, things like that. I would say most of your root vegetables, you're just as well off starting from seed as trying to do transplants, because that's a lot. You gotta think. Well, I'm gonna think back to like a livestock person, because that's my background. But it's like you're putting a lot of stress on that plant, especially that root plant, because you're digging it up and replanting it, and that root is what you're trying to get it to produce. So when you're transplanting it from one location to another one, it's like when you take a calf off a cow, you're stressing that calf. So you got to be extra careful, extra baby them for a day or two. Like when you're weaning them, because they're going to be bawling and where's mama at? Why am I not getting any milk? What's this feed you're trying to feed me? I don't want this. So I think the root vegetables would be the same way when you're transplanting them from where you started growing them to where you're going to try and finish them out at. So I think with a lot of your root vegetables, you're just better off just planting. Make sure you're planting at the right depth. Make sure you've got your soil fertility right, and just planting straight into those locations and doing what you need to kind of provide some extra protection, extra warmth, and doing it that way instead of trying to do transplant. Because I think you may end up putting all that work into trying to transplant and then seeing a lesser crop than if you just planted directly into your growing location.
So I have a garlic bundle, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And I got it in August during the summer, could you plant it or not? Just if you wanted to experiment.
You could, yeah. I'd give it a try. As long as it was cured the right way, you should have it.
It grows easy in the ground and every place outside.
I have raised beds that I might try.
Yeah, if you got, I'd almost try it in the raised beds also.
Yeah. And would they actually need to be covered like we were just going over though?
You would want to give them some protection.
Something? Okay.
Yeah.
I can probably figure out something. Okay. Yeah, I might try both just to see what happens.
Now, like I said, with the raised beds, depending on like the way your raised beds are set up, you could, if you had some like bags of shavings or something, as long as it was deep enough, if you had like a glass window pane, it doesn't even have to be glass, you could get a piece of plexiglass, just something to kind of give that greenhouse effect, because that's what you're trying to do with those cold frames. As long as you had enough room to like warm that could be a good alternative. You just need a way to like let it vent off a little bit on like these brighter sunny days. Like today, it's still getting cool at night and in the mornings. So this is time where you might think about using those cold springs, but like during the midday, you might position it where you're letting some of that warm air out, so you're not trapping it all under there, so you're not running the risk of overheating those plants. It's
When do you braid it? After it's cured?
when you
When do
braid
you
it.
braid the garlic?
That's one I did not come across. I think you do it after you
After
cured
the
it.
5 weeks, okay.
Yeah, yeah, 6 weeks. You got cured for 6 weeks. Yep, 6 weeks. And if y'all will give me your, I've got a thing there. If you'll give me your email addresses, we've got a garlic growing publication. I wasn't in the office yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to print all this stuff off. I had planned on printing all this, bringing some of those publications. Well, we've got one for growing garlic and growing carrots. So those varieties, we've got some different varieties that are on there. And I think the carrot one also goes over some other root vegetables like beets and turnips. As I used to say. So it goes over a couple of different root vegetables that commonly are grown in the fall.